Hello. The first thing I want to say is sorry. I feel like I should say sorry that there's been this gap between the last video. I know that I try to put them out on Fridays and sometimes they go out on Mondays as well, and I've tried to keep it casual because I can't always stick to that, but I still feel like I just haven't shown up to an appointment, and I feel like that whenever I miss a Friday. And now it's just gone on and on. On Friday I thought, well, never mind, I'll do it tomorrow. And I've been thinking that every day, and I just haven't had a chance to make a video. I've just had a lot going on and have just been really busy. But anyway, I'm going to put this one up today, and I'm going to put one up this Friday, and then hopefully get back into the rhythm of mainly Fridays again. And I'm aiming at some point to make them Mondays and Fridays. I'm not quite sure when that's going to happen. So anyway, but today what I wanted to talk about is some of the ideas about Chris Watts that I consider to be myths. And I don't want to keep talking about Chris Watts because I think this channel has become a Chris Watts channel again. And, I noticed a troll saying something like that, but obviously in a not so nice way in the comments section. And I thought, well, actually they do have a point, because now the videos are all about him again. I think there's been 4 in a row now. No, actually, I think there have been 5 of them now. So this is now the 6th one. And there's something else that I want to talk about next time, because a brilliant viewer has emailed me with this great idea, something that's been in the media quite a lot. So anyway, I'll talk about that at the end of the video. But so I'm going to talk about that on Friday. But so today, though, what I want to talk about are the myths about Chris Watts. So they're the things that people say about him to explain why he isn't a narcissist. And I think it's important to talk about them, because the whole point of why I talk about him is to explain why I think he is a narcissist, in order for people to be able to get a sense of how a covert narcissist behaves, so that it's easier to see the red flags. Once you people have sometimes said, well, what are the red flags? And there are some that I've mentioned about how they rush into relationships very, very quickly, and just pour all of this affection onto someone and put them on a pedestal. So that there are some things that you can watch out for, but I think most of it is just a general pattern. Once you start to see the pattern, it's easier to see it in people rather than individual characteristics that other people might have as well. It's more just the pattern of characteristics. And so when I hear about people who are saying the opposite on YouTube, that are giving, I guess, who are saying that no, he's not a narcissist, and they're giving their views on why, I think it's important that I give my opinion on that, because I don't really want people to miss those signs. That's basically why, because that is the point of why I talk about it. This isn't a crime channel. It's a channel that's intended to help people. So for that reason, I'm going to look at some of these reasons that have been given for him not being a narcissist. So another extremely helpful viewer has been in touch with me and has very kindly given me a list of the main arguments for why he isn't a narcissist that she's seen. So I'm going to go through them one by one. Okay, so one of the things that she's told me, one of the arguments given for why he isn't a narcissist, is that he seemed to push Shanann away, distancing himself from her and the children. Why would he feel the need to do that if he is truly cold and has no emotions? He would just continue to act as his normal self up until the murders. So the distancing showed he had to do that for his own sake to be able to do what he was planning, thus showing depth of emotions. Okay, so I mean, I guess the first myth there is that a narcissist doesn't have depth of emotions. And I do want to add, I know I've said this several times in different videos now, that I'm calling him a narcissist because I believe he's a narcissist. I think that he is a covert narcissist. But I use the term narcissist because that's something that people come across in everyday life. You know, there are lots of narcissists around, there are fewer psychopaths. So I've made another video about whether he could be called a psychopath and what a psychopath is, you know, because people have different ideas. There's a lot of argument amongst experts about what a psychopath actually is. So we can use the term sociopath, that he's a sociopath, and I think he is, but sociopath isn't a clinical term. So anyway, if you're interested in that, that's the video. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name. I go through three people, including Chris Watts. I look at 3 different people and I ask, are they psychopaths? One of them is Patrick Frazee, actually. So you can see that if you go to the playlists. But anyway, looking at him being a narcissist, I talk about him being a narcissist because that's something that more people can relate to. And the red flags that we can see for Chris Watts, we can also see in these other people who can also be really dangerous, but that we're more likely to meet in everyday life. So one of the first myths then about being a narcissist is the idea that a narcissist doesn't have deep emotions. That's not true at all. They can have very deep and intense emotions. They can feel shame, and I've talked about that in probably most of my videos about narcissists, that they can feel shame and they can feel anger to the point of it being rage. So that's a very deep, intense emotion because that anger has been there since they were children. So it's not a shallow anger. And then there are lots of other emotions they can feel. They can feel jealousy. They can feel good, you know, when they're getting narcissistic supply. They can feel really high, and they can feel powerful. They can feel powerless. They can feel lots of different emotions. I mean, one of the emotions that they feel less than most people feel is empathy. But most other emotions they can feel just like everyone else can feel them. So it's simply not true to say that a narcissist wouldn't have deep feelings. So the other thing that this person is talking about is the idea that he distanced himself from Shanann and the girls because of his emotions, and it wasn't that he had no emotions towards them. So otherwise he would have acted himself. That's the argument. This argument assumes that he was close to the girls and then he became distant from them. That's what's stated in the argument. But I don't agree with that premise in the first place. I don't think he was ever close to them. I think it was all an act. And so I don't believe he did become distant from them. I just believe that then he dropped his mask and his true colours began to emerge. Everything before that was just false. And he managed to keep that up with his family. I don't know if he always did, and I would imagine that his mask would have slipped from time to time. But the same with his friends, he was able to keep that mask on. You know, so many people were really shocked by what he was actually capable of. So I don't think that argument holds any weight because I don't agree with the premise of the argument. You know, people can kill people, certainly by accident or in a fit of rage, but the lengths that he went to and the depravity of it just doesn't fit with somebody who could have actually genuinely cared about his family. And nor does the way he's behaved since then, in front of the TV cameras and then with his father afterwards, that he could have suggested that Shanann did it, the way that he was with the police officers, you know, the focus, the way that he would talk about Bella's cute dress and their shoes, and the way that he was able to talk about the girls as if he really cared about them in a sort of light-hearted way, having just murdered them. It just doesn't fit with someone who genuinely had feelings for them. You know, and then there's a clip when the detective leaves the room where he's on his own and he's just looking at videos of the girls, and then he looks up at the camera at one point, and that just feels like, again, he's just doing this for us, you know, for show, or for the detectives to think that he misses them. But it's always very false. And, you know, I did this video called Cracks in the Mask that just talks about how false his statements are, and how he goes to the lengths to really exaggerate, the things that he says because he doesn't mean them. There's so many examples in his behaviour that show us that there wasn't any true intimacy that he felt towards his family. So if you're in any doubt about that, please do re-watch or watch some of those videos I've done, because I've gone into a lot of detail and analysed pretty much, you know, often word for word, the things that he's said, and why there's no emotion there, why there's no emotion in terms of caring for his family. I've also talked about how before a narcissist discards somebody, and it's called the final discard, the last time that they're going to discard somebody, and they will usually have another source of supply in the wings waiting, because they always need a source of supply. And so before they do that, they will devalue their target, you know, or their partner in this case his partner and his family. So he was apparently not giving any affection to the girls when they were away, and to Shanann as well. And then we know that some of the things that he was saying to Shanann about how he didn't want the baby and so on. So this distancing that this YouTuber was talking about is actually is not actually distancing himself, it's devaluing his family. So he devalued his family before he murdered them. This is a pattern that narcissists use, and there will always be that. There's always the idealization phase, followed by the devaluation phase, followed by the discard, and that's the pattern. And very often then it all begins again with, you know, relationships can continually break up and get back together and break up and get back together, or else the discard can be a threat. It can seem that it's a discard when actually the narcissist has no intention of it being one. And in a relationship that's not a romantic relationship, the discard can be a bit different. You know, it can seem like, for instance, a child is abandoned by the parent, or that suddenly, you know, they're just not speaking to them at all. That can feel like a discard. So there are different ways of there being a discard, and in this case the discard, the final discard, was murder. But before that happened, there was devaluation, and you can see that Shanann was feeling that devaluation. She was really anxious and really stressed about it, and she was trying to sort the relationship out because of all this devaluation going on. You know, she was suddenly being treated as if she was nothing and as if she didn't matter. So another thing that's been said has been that he did not want to be the centre of attention at all, no need to have things his way, and didn't seem to have a need to be acknowledged and adored, as it is said is the centre of the narcissist. So, I mean, I with all of that, I would disagree. So a covert narcissist just does things differently, and all of this is still there. It just comes across differently. So with Chris Watts, he when he was being interviewed by the detectives, the time where he showed any sort of horror relating to the murders was only when they talked about how his colleagues no, sorry, he was thinking about his colleagues discovering what he'd done. So they were talking about going to the oil batteries and recovering the bodies. And that was when he looked terrified and horrified and showed a lot of emotion. And he said how he didn't want his colleagues to see any of this. And also, at the sentencing, when his parents were there and his parents were talking about him, you could see that he physically couldn't contain himself. You know, his leg was going up and down and he was really in an absolute state. But you only see these reactions when it's about what somebody is thinking of him and, you know, the risk of being thought of badly. And throughout the interviews with the detectives in the police station, but also the ones in March, he's talking over and over again about what they might think of him, and he's trying to put himself across in a certain light. You know, he talks about how all the things he did for Shanann when they were first together, the ways in which he helped Nicole, and he's just always putting across all the kind things he's done, and the kind of person that he likes to be seen as. It's just really clear how he wants to be perceived, and he's talking a lot about how the public view him, and how the people interviewing him might be viewing him. It's just repetitive, you know, over and over again. It's about how he's being seen, and that always seems to be the main concern. And I'm not going to give particular examples here because I've done it so much throughout the videos, but if you are curious, then just have a look at some of my videos and you'll see there's just one example after another throughout, you know, when I look at the things he says, where he's just completely focused on how he's coming across, and that always comes first for him. It's much more important to him how he's viewed than anything else, and than the suffering of his family. So going back to that argument that he doesn't seem to have a need to be acknowledged and adored, I'd say that he's very much the opposite of that, that he does have a very strong need to be adored and to be acknowledged, and that he does need to be the centre of attention, but just in a different way. It says no need to have things his way. Well, in one sense, that's true. So as a covert narcissist, he played the role of somebody who was almost as if he was a sidekick to Shanann, and that's the way he operated. So he would do the same with Nicole Kessinger. He would make them out to be the more powerful one in the relationship, and that would be how he would relate to different people, that they would be the one to be more powerful, and it would seem as if he's the more shy and just helpful and kind one, and that they might be the one who's more in a position to be bossy and authoritative. But actually, that's just how a covert narcissist operates. That's how they ensnare their victims, by giving them this false sense of security and power. And that's exactly what Chris Watts did. So although in one sense he wasn't being the centre of attention, it was quite the opposite. He would shower people with compliments, and it would seem as if they're the centre of attention. This was actually just a really manipulative, divisive strategy, and in the end, he does want to be the centre of it all. Of attention, in that he wants to be the centre of people's positive attention. He wants everyone to think really well of him. When he murdered his family, that's when we see his mask fall off, and him having this need to be utterly in control. He showed absolutely no remorse, and no, you know, when he was being interviewed in the police station, when he was talking to the TV cameras, you didn't see any sense of that. And he had a long time to, after killing Shanann, he had a long time before he killed his daughters, according to what he says. And there was plenty of time to think, and nothing was going to stop him, and this was all premeditated. He's admitted that he'd been thinking about this for weeks. So all of this was about control, very much. Burying the girls in oil batteries was in one way a way to dispose of the bodies that people probably wouldn't guess. It would be harder to find them. So there's there's all of those reasons for it. But also, to be capable of doing that shows that he wasn't respectful of the bodies. If this wasn't about power, there would have been some respect for the bodies when he buried them. That there would have been respect for Shanann's body as well. And I've said already that he's admitted that he left her in that degrading position because of his anger. So again, it was all about power. So then another argument is, if he was so concerned how people perceived him, why didn't he participate in portraying himself in a positive way on social media, etc.? He was more avoiding to put himself out there in any kind of light. So yeah, that's true. He wasn't trying to be on YouTube, Facebook. In those Facebook videos that Shanann was making, you could see that he was really uncomfortable. He wasn't somebody to want to put himself out there. I think Shanann apparently had control of his Facebook account some of the time. So all of that is very true. And when he did the TV interviews, he was asked to do them and he agreed. And I think he agreed because he wanted to look like he was innocent. And he thought he would look guilty if he said no. But I think that what's being taken from that is not the actual reason for it. So the question here is, if he was so concerned with how people perceived him, then why wouldn't he be participating in portraying himself in a positive way on social media and so on? Well, he was really concerned with how people perceived him, but that doesn't mean that he was somebody who would want to put himself out there. That wasn't his character. He seems to me to be quite an introverted person, and a covert narcissist isn't an overt narcissist. Someone who's very clearly and obviously a narcissist is going to be, and I think that this is the issue. I think that all these arguments are based on one perception of what a narcissist is, and there's not just one kind of narcissist. They don't all come across in the same way, and if they did, it would be so much easier to spot them. We wouldn't have to worry about red flags, because it would be so obvious as soon as they walked into the room. It would be the people that need to be the centre of attention. That's sort of what many people think a narcissist is, that it's someone who's vain, has to be the centre of attention, is bossy, all of this kind of thing. But it goes much deeper than that. And yes, he didn't like to be the centre of attention, but he was extremely manipulative and needed to be perceived in a certain way. A narcissist might not need to be the centre of attention in the room, but they do need to be the most important person in any given situation. And to be the most important person is different from being the person who is the loudest in the room, or the person who's on social media all the time. That's a different thing, because you can feel like your thoughts and feelings matter more than anyone else's, and be quiet. You can be a quiet person and have those feelings and beliefs, and you can think that everybody needs to see you in a certain way and that you're prepared to manipulate them into doing so, and that them liking you is much more important than whether they're happy or not. You know, that you'll treat them in a certain way so that they think well of you, and in the end it is all about you. But that doesn't mean that you also like media attention, or that you like to talk loudly at parties or wear loud clothes. It's a very different thing. Another argument is that Chris held emotions in, that he wasn't cold, he just seemed it because he was holding his emotions in, and people are misreading it. I don't see any sign of that. There are people who, this reminds me a bit of the last video I made about autism. There are people who might not put across their emotions very clearly, but they can still feel them. And I don't see how Chris Watts is one of them, because the way that he's behaved has been heartless. To have murdered one toddler in front of the other is clearly heartless. To have had them both in the car with their dead mother is heartless. You know, to have made a packed lunch before he took them is, again, that there's no empathy in any of his behaviour towards his family. And, you know, and I guess I've covered this a lot in this video already, really, the way that he buried them and so on, but everything that he did at that time is very cold, very calculated, making sure that he was going to be at the oil batteries on his own. And when he was texting about that, he was at a party with his children, and there he was plotting their murders while he'd done their hair the way that Shanann liked it and was taking photos of them for her. You know, all of this points to the fact that no, he wasn't somebody who had all these strong emotions and is just hiding them. That it's actually the opposite. He's trying to show that he has all of these emotions, but actually they're not evident anywhere. And when I say emotions, again, I'm talking about empathy. So actually it's not that he holds them all in. He's constantly trying to put across how warm and caring he is at any opportunity, but there's just no evidence that he is when you look at the facts. And anything that he did do for Shanann that might have suggested he had empathy, he's sort of given himself away, because he's gone on about anything nice he's ever done in these interviews, and he's made it clear that he wants everyone to think that he's this really nice guy, because he's gone on and on about it. Somebody who really would, you know, who really is a nice guy would have been the opposite. They would have been going on and on about everything they did wrong and feeling really terrible about it. But instead, he's always talking about all the things he did right. And again, there are lots of examples in previous videos about this, but one of the things is how he helped Nicole with her neurosis that he would tell us about, and how he went to the hospital with Shanann even when they were first dating, that he helped her at her colonoscopy, and you know, just various examples of how helpful and nice he is. So another argument was that there's a level of narcissism in everyone, and that the word narcissist is thrown around a lot. So I agree with both of those arguments, but I don't think they relate to whether Chris Watts is a narcissist. Everyone does have some degree of narcissism in them. So the fact that the word narcissist is thrown around a lot, that's very true, but that doesn't have anything to do with whether Chris Watts is a narcissist or not. It's not really, I mean, it's not even an argument. People like Chris Watts rely on everyone misunderstanding what a narcissist is, and because, you know, they are wolves in sheep's clothing, so they rely on people not noticing, on slipping under the radar, so that they can manipulate people and exploit them, to get what they need in order to get their narcissistic supply. It doesn't matter who they harm in the process, but the way that they slip onto the radar is to come across in a way that makes people not suspect them and makes people think that they're far from attention seekers. They're just nice, kind people who might just struggle a bit to show their emotions. That's exactly what helps them to get away with what they get away with. And a lot of people are fooled by them. So I'm going to leave it here, and in the next video I'm going to look at Russ McKaney and McKaney Manor because of this helpful viewer who sent me a link about it. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.